The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Q Points. Welcome to I Come Alive, Stories of Black Gay Atlanta Nightlife. I am your host, DJ Sir Daniel. This series strives to tell the stories of Atlanta's gay nightlife from the perspective of the people who lived it. This episode comes on the eve of the 2024 Atlanta Black Gay Pride celebration, and as the city gears up to welcome thousands of visitors for a weekend of Black excellence, parties, and live music events. My first guest is Mike Slaughter, a transplant from Los Angeles, California, who at the turn of the century made a decision that would change not only his life, but the lives of many Black gay men in metropolitan Atlanta. Enjoy the show. I couldn't think of someone that I wanted to speak with more than the gentleman that I'm about to introduce to you. I want to show you some love first because you, and I think I mentioned this to you, at the beginning of my DJ journey, you were one of the first people to allow me space to just try it out. And when I tell you all, I was green. I was very green at the DJ game. I had just gotten my first controller with these huge platters, and I had a laptop full of music, and I just knew I was going to turn the party out. Those of you that are listening that are from Atlanta, you have heard about the legend of the house in Cascade and about the parties in Cascade, the house parties in Cascade. And Michael Slaughter is the procure, is that the word I want to use? Or the curator of those good times in that home. And when I tell you, Mike used to open up his home to so many people and allowed us to come in there and to just congregate, to have a good time, to let our hair down in a very safe environment, safe and loving environment. And I got the opportunity to spend there. So I wanted to say thank you again for starting me off on that journey.
You're welcome. Those were the good old days too, weren't they?
Those were some fantastic days. Like just to start off, and just in this little conversation, like what made you want to start opening your home to having people come over and to have those great parties?
The biggest motivator of that was, at the time, there didn't seem to be a space where, like you said, people could come to feel safe, they would feel welcome, and it be in not necessarily a club environment, because there were plenty of club options at the time, plenty of nightlife options at the time, but there wasn't anything that I felt was giving above barely average experience.
Mm-hmm.
And having a house that could host a large number of people with a nice large backyard and a basement area, it just seemed like a natural opportunity to provide something. It started out with just a group of friends of us getting together occasionally, and then that started to grow and grow, and then we decided, hey, let's just open this up to more and more people. And I think the culmination of that experience was that New Year's Eve party, Smashed ATL, where I swear it seemed like the entire city of Atlanta.
Oh my God. Oh my God. We're going to talk about that a little later, because my God, if you weren't there, there's just no amount of storytelling to help you get an understanding of what took place in Cascade. But again, thank you for allowing me to DJ some of those parties. What made you give me a shot? I've always wanted to know that.
Well, part of what we were doing also was engaging people in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Engaging, we had somewhat inexperienced bartenders, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had somewhat inexperienced, just people helping, but it was an opportunity to give them that exposure, give them that experience. And then when I learned you were getting into DJing, I was like, well, shoot, bring them in. Let's give them a chance, give them an opportunity to space. Cause, learning your craft and experiencing and exercising your craft requires someone to take a chance and someone to give you that opportunity. And what better place to do it in a safe space that we were providing.
For all those upcoming DJs, you need places where you can practice, because doing it at home and playing on your computer and playing on a controller is one thing, but learning your chops and earning your stripes in front of people is a completely different animal.
Yes.
And Mike, your group of friends started out, you and your friends started out in these doing these parties and opening, spaces to Black Queer Atlanta. But where are you originally from, and when did you arrive in Atlanta?
I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, Baldwin Hills. And then left LA to go to school in Northern California at UC Berkeley.
Okay.
After graduating there, I stayed and lived in Oakland for a little while, and then met someone who introduced me to Atlanta. And shortly after that, the decision was made that Atlanta is where I needed to be, and made the move in 1998. At the end of 1990, the summer of 1998. Literally moved to Atlanta Memorial Day weekend, drove from Oakland to Atlanta, got here Memorial Day weekend.
Wait, you drove?
Yes.
How many days did that take?
3 days.
Wow.
3 days in my GMC Sierra pickup truck and a U-Haul behind it. But it was a fun trip. Made a few stops. We made a stop at the Grand Canyon, a few other little interesting odds and ends to make the trip not monotonous and boring.
Right. So that was 1998.
Yes.
Do you recall the first club or bar you attended when you got here to Atlanta?
So let's see. It was a whirlwind weekend, so it was several on the same weekend.
All right, let's hear about it.
But I want to say the first was the Palace.
Okay.
On Sunday night, right?
Yes.
Sunday tea party.
Yes. And I'm trying to remember. So my recollection of when you enter into the establishment, you enter, it's like a little foyer, right?
Yes.
And then I think you can go upstairs
or slightly downstairs.
I don't think I ventured downstairs. I was a little too scared to go downstairs for whatever reason. But I remember the music thumping so hard, and that floor seemed to move quite a bit. Okay, so I'm not imagining things.
No, that was everyone knew that floor was sketchy, but it didn't stop us from going, right? Because that was the place to be seen. You had to be there.
So before you came to Atlanta, did you party in your hometown? Did you party at all? And what was that scene like?
A little bit. In Oakland, the scene was real kind of, at that time, it was real underground.
Mm-hmm.
We had 2 gay clubs in Oakland, and then 1 or 2 in San Francisco. There were a lot of white gay clubs in San Francisco, but for blacks, there was probably maybe 1, and it was monthly. And I went to that once, and it was kind of it was, the experience there was that everyone was in a very protected space.
Okay.
And I don't mean in the space that we were in, but within themselves.
Okay.
That, being black and gay and out in Oakland was not the thing at the time. And so even just being seen going in or out of one of these clubs that were known to be a gay club, people were kind of, dodging and looking around and just trying to be real, just kind of secretive about their life and their experiences. And So I didn't really ever feel comfortable in those spaces because to me it seemed like it was a challenge to even have a discussion with someone if you weren't part of that group that they were with. Um, and then outside of that, engaging with people, there really wasn't a lot of spaces at the time as well. So Oakland to me was kind of an odd transition.
Hmm.
And the difference between what I experienced in Oakland and what I experienced in Atlanta when I first visited, I was just like, whoa. Because my first experience in Atlanta was I came for Labor Day weekend. So coming from conservative, undercover, DL, kind of like just secretive Oakland, and then now showing up in Atlanta during Labor Day weekend, Pride weekend for Black Gay Pride, and seeing everyone out, everyone enjoying themselves, not worrying about who's looking at them, who sees them. Clubs are packed and people are having a good time. And I was just like, this is very enlightening, very open, and it was exciting. It was like electric.
Hmm.
I remember when Tracks used to have their legendary outdoor party, they'd block off the whole street, and that was just
Yes.
standing out on the street was part of the party. You didn't even have to be in the club. You could just be
It
outside on the
it
street.
didn't make sense to pay money to go inside because you could really just literally stay outside on Lucky Street,
Exactly.
hear the music, and congregate
And
and just
congregate, watch the sights, see the
boy
folks,
watching,
boy,
see
all of that. Yeah.
and how little people had on and or what they were wearing. So I feel like there's a consensus that everybody kind of we congregated at Tracks mostly because it was probably the largest
It
of
was.
the
Yeah.
clubs that you can go to and have space to move around. And it really was the place that people will point out. But it was definitely a place, let's say 98. I would safely say hip hop kind of took over from what was predominantly a house music driven space at
Yeah.
Tracks.
Yeah.
Do you recall, was there like a song
Oh
that
God, yes.
takes you back, you hear it and it takes you right back to that experience?
The Boy Is Mine.
Ah, okay. Yes, that was the time that it dropped.
And
Yes.
when I tell you it was the anthem of that year for Black gay men,
Mm,
and everyone, you'd hear cars driving by blasting that song
mm.
over and over again. And it was just everywhere you went, every club was playing it over and over again. It was just that was the song to play for that year of Black Gay Pride. And it's forever etched into my head. And every time I hear that song, it just brings back all of that experience and all that feeling and all that excitement of being out. And the hot outside, it's humid, but you don't care because
Mhm.
everybody's out there. You're seeing people you haven't seen in a while or meeting people you've been wanting to meet. And it was that song connects me to all of that.
You know what I remember fondly the most about that song is how if you were there with your friends, everybody automatically took a part.
Oh yeah, yeah. You have to pick a
It's
side.
it's like either you were Monica or you were Brandy with it,
Right,
and
right.
if you would see the dance floor of everybody just like singing to each other and rolling their necks and just really pantomiming along with the song. And while I forgot how much fun that song was when it first dropped, and
Oh yeah.
being able to be in those spaces at that time. Now you mentioned coming here for Labor Day weekend.
Mhm.
Now, was it officially Atlanta Black Gay Pride when you first started, or was it just Labor Day weekend? And because that was a very specific time when I think Atlanta transitioned into the Black Gay Mecca.
That was the transition period. I think that was really that was what it really coalesced into it being there's a group of people in the life Atlanta had already formed and had begun putting the roots down for bringing some organization and purpose to Labor Day weekend, which, to back up a little bit on how Labor Day weekend even got going,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of In the Life Atlanta, was again a group of friends would get together every Labor Day weekend in Atlanta and have a barbecue, and that started to grow and grow and grow, and it's those kind of little accidental meetings and accidental gatherings of people that begin to, you know, take a life of their own, that bring these things to life. And so as the number of people coming to Atlanta for Labor Day Black Gay Pride, so to it wasn't necessarily Black Gay Pride then, but coming to celebrate as Black gay LGBT people, um, this group of people decided to get together and formalize a organization that would bring again some purpose and some activities and some um, education to the weekend as well. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just coming together to party. Let's do some things that help empower the people. Since we have a captive audience, we can bring them in. So when I showed up visiting in 1998, I was introduced to this group and the people who were putting on the group, and immediately put to work.
Of course.
um, and that got me even more excited because that was an alignment of kind of the things that I like to do: organizing, putting things together, and seeing the outcome. So as I'm making my decision shortly after that, am I going to move to Atlanta? That also played a part of it. So there was a lot of things that really influenced me wanting to make that move and actually doing it. And one of the things was that there was this sense of community that was developing in Atlanta, that was not just a group of people going to a club, but looking to do more as well.
I must say, I remember the first time that I went to an In the Life event. I think it was at the Host Hotel. I want to say it was the Renaissance.
Renaissance was, yeah, probably the
It
Renaissance.
was the Renaissance, and I had never been because I was maybe what, 23, 24. I had never been. I'm still kind of just figuring things out and not wanting to associate myself with events or be seen. You know how,
Yep,
we
yep.
go through that, right?
That process, yeah.
That process. But I do recall walking through the lobby and just being
Yeah.
in awe at all the, you all had signage. I mean, there was no question that the hotel had been taken
Oh
over.
yeah, not at all.
There was signage. There were just so many booths, people, selling their items, and there was literature. There were people, fashion shows, all of those different things. And now that I think about it, if a young Black queer person comes to Atlanta now, they don't experience any of that
No,
anymore.
not anymore. No.
In your opinion, and the things that happen, why did that, not the organization itself, but why did the desire for organization or organized events, why did that kind of disappear, or why do you think we kind of tend to stray away from it and just want to do our own thing?
Well, my experience and my opinion on what took place, and this is from being in the organization at the time
Mm-hmm.
when things started to happen. Um, there was, in the early days of In the Life Atlanta and the community developing in Atlanta, there was a lot of, everybody came together to work together. The club promoters, the In the Life Atlanta folks, other community organizations, everybody came together to work intensely to ensure that there was a broad spectrum of events that were available for folks. And everybody wanted their piece of the pie, obviously, but they figured if we
Mm-hmm.
work together, we reach a common goal. Um, and I'm just going to be blunt.
Please do.
At some point, as things progressed and the numbers started getting larger and larger and larger, greed took over. a lot of
as it
these,
usually does.
a lot of these promoters, that was their cash cow for the year. Yeah, they may sustain their operations throughout the year, but Labor Day weekend was the weekend they were going to pay those bills. They were going to pay, those mortgages, those car payments,
Uh-huh.
all that was going to happen from the proceeds from Labor Day weekend.
Mike, about how many people do you think the city saw, say that summer of 19, let's say summer 99?
99, I would say that was at the beginning of the rise of the numbers.
Okay.
So 99, I would say, we were probably somewhere in the 30 to 40,000. And that's a lot.
That's nothing
But
to
it's
shake a stick at, for sure. Yeah.
not near where when we got to the peak. And that's what, the numbers are hard to quantify to some degree, but we got help at some point from the Atlanta Visitors Bureau on how to start collating our numbers, because we didn't have anyone out there counting everybody, right?
Right.
Not everybody is staying in a hotel, so you don't have a way to count those people that are crashing on somebody's sofa, sleeping in their car, whatever the case may be. So they gave us a formula that said, okay, you can count the ones you can count. We'll give you the numbers from the hotel bookings, and we'll assume that the hotel bookings are a certain percentage outside of our host hotel, which we knew for sure. And they had this from the just data they had from previous years of doing events. And so getting that numbers from them, we don't think we were really counting accurate numbers until somewhere in the early 2000s.
Okay.
And that's when we were able to start looking at the actual economic impact that this event, a gathering of people, however you want to call it, was having on the city as a whole. And and that's when the city started taking a better and closer look at us and being more open to the things we were doing and asking of the city. And we started getting participation from the mayor's office and proclamations. At some point, we were even getting recognition from the governor's office. Georgia's traditionally a Republican governed state. I think at a short period of time, we did have a Democratic governor that was very helpful in moving things for us. But in general, it's the numbers talk and the money talk. And I think, as those numbers rose and we started seeing more and more people, more and more money was being made at these promoter and club events, they started seeing more and more of an opportunity and pushing their services, their events, their parties, and pretty much overpowering the messaging that we could put out as just a nonprofit community organization, right? We didn't have profit money behind us. We didn't have large sponsorships behind us. So our ability to get our messages out over above the noise of constant text messages and emails that were coming from the club promoters just kind of pushed In the Life Atlanta to the side.
Okay. And and that makes sense. I kind of, as somebody looking from the outside looking in, I kind of see where that happened. Yes, I was getting the text messages, of course, if you go to one event and you're driving, by the time you leave, your car is littered with flyers. So you're going to find out about other events in the city at that time, at one event or another.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about the city taking notice.
Yes.
And when I think back on that, how the public kind of was gasping and gagging, like, where did all these black gay men come from all of a sudden?
Right.
It's like we just landed from outer space. But in your opinion, like just thinking back on it, like how do you think the city changed when it realized, or they could not ignore the fact that it had such a large black gay population? Because as you said, you came on a Labor Day weekend and ended up moving.
Right.
Fast forward 2 to 3 years, the population, I'm sure, more than doubled.
Oh yeah.
After those Pride weekends became more organized. And like, what do you think the city of Atlanta owes us, don't you think?
You know, of course they do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'd be a fool to say they didn't. I will say that for a period of time, the city of Atlanta opened the doors. They opened the doors. What do you need us to do? What can we do to help? What can we provide? And out of that became conversations. When I was a board member within the Life Atlanta, it was regular occurrence that I would have a meeting with the mayor at the mayor's office.
And this was Shirley Franklin at the time?
Shirley Franklin, and then who followed her?
I'm going to look that up, but continue.
Okay.
You would get meetings and the doors were wide open. The communication was wide open.
Communication was wide open. We would bounce off our ideas to the city on what we wanted to do and give them our whole itinerary of what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
They were publishing it on their website. It was being published on the Atlanta Visitors and Convention Bureau's website, which I thought that opened a lot of, when we started getting that type of recognition and ability to have our events listed in these very public spaces where the, Atlanta Pride, which is the traditionally white pride organization,
Right.
Atlanta Pride had those privileges for years. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started getting that recognition and ability to be at the table, we could be present, we could have conversations. I think more and more things within the city started to coalesce around recognizing the large number of LGBTQ people in the city. And it was shortly after that we got the first liaison on the police department, an LGBTQ liaison. And so things like that started changing, and that benefited everybody. And, there's a lot of these little things that people don't really notice or don't pay attention to, but there was a lot of underground work that made that happen.
Definitely. So in 2010, Atlanta elected Kasim Reed as the mayor.
That's
it was
right. It
Kasim.
was Kasim Reed. Yes,
It was
that's right.
Kasim back in 2010.
I knew it was a K.
That's right. And I'm like, I could see his face, but it was definitely Kasim Reed.
Yes.
And you mentioned the city of Atlanta having a police liaison. And I don't think, well, today you can find police support in some certain major cities when
Yes.
it comes to pride events across the country. But I think that was very forward. I had never seen it before. I was even surprised to see the black gay officers like out and being a part of the actual events and being there. And they had their markings showing that they were not only police, but they were also part of the community. So I think that, I would have never connected the two, but because of being a part of those organizations, helped that and help bring that a little sense of safety
right
here, because there's not too many other cities where black and gay people feel safe.
Right, exactly. It was an interesting connection with the police. I used to remember we used to go to a club out in Stone Mountain,
Phase one.
Phase one.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a number of Atlanta PD officers that would party there with us on those nights. And it was always quite funny to see they let their hair down. And you see them during the day in uniform, and they're just as professional as anybody else, but they were there and they were part of the community. They knew what was going on. And I think in a lot of senses, they shielded us from some of the scrutiny or potential bad treatment that may have been potentially of perpetrated against our community during certain events. And having them there, like you said, having that safety, having the liaison, it put everybody at ease,
Yeah,
because you weren't fearing that you're going to be arrested just for being a gay person
exactly.
walking out of Bulldogs at 3 in the morning.
There's that. And you were you might get into a fight.
Well, that's a different story.
You would get into a fight with another patron, but the officer wasn't going to try and beat you up. That's for sure.
Right.
So we talked about the promoters kind of throwing their dick on the table, as it were, when it came to staking claim and trying to get their piece and get larger pieces of the pie.
Yes.
Then why, in your opinion, where are all of those people? Where are those spaces, that we used to have? There would be at least 10 options for you to go somewhere during the week or the weekend, but now we're down to a very select few. We're down to maybe a handful of places to go. And it's not just clubs, it's lounges, it's restaurants. We used to be able to go to Joe's on Juniper,
right,
and Einstein's, but now all of those are gone. So in your opinion, what happened to the scene? What happened to all of these Black and queer spaces?
I think economics.
Mm-hmm.
When you really look at it, it comes down to economics. And as a community, we're not insulated from the changes of a metropolitan area. There was a period of time when Atlanta went through a culling, so to speak, of bars and clubs and decimated Buckhead.
Absolutely.
Because of potential for violence. There were 1 or 2 incidents, but that was enough to instill fear in the residents of Buckhead to push for the closure of Buckhead as a nightlife center. And that affected the whole city, in my opinion, because now the perception of Atlanta as a mecca for nightlife has been tarnished. But then when you move into the spaces that we typically occupied, these were not high-end clubs. They were lower-end venues. Most of them didn't have a lot of amenities. I would wager to say a number of them probably were not code compliant.
Could have been a little dangerous getting up in there or getting out.
Or exactly. And we as a community didn't own any of these spaces. We leased or promoted an event in the space on a night, but there was no outright ownership of a lot of these venues. And that is a barrier in some degree, because if the business decides to change what they're doing with their space, that's going to affect you as a promoter or tenant in that venue. And as the city changes and develops different areas, that drives changes in what those venues can charge, or what they perceive they can charge, and who they perceive would be their best clientele. So if they decide, okay, I'm no longer quote unquote desperate enough to have a gay night, I can just squeeze that tenant out, focus on my higher end clients, and get my money. And so now the spaces that we traditionally had a night or two to have to ourselves are gone. And I think that's been a shift that you see throughout other cities as well, not just Atlanta. But Atlanta, I think, got hit the hardest because we did have such a diverse number of venues, a diverse number of promoters. And then I'm going to throw it out there. There was also the rivalry between the promoters. And from what I've seen, the battles between promoters did a fair amount of damage. We lost a number of promoters through those battles, blackballing entertainers. If you go work at this for that other promoter, you can't work for me, or I'm going to write an exclusive contract that you can only work for us, so you can't go work somewhere else, but you only have an event 2 nights a week that's not competing with somebody else's event that's on another night, but you've excluded these people from working at another location because that puts you as an advantage and your competition at a disadvantage.
Hmm.
And so, a lot of that took place in the mid 2000s. And that's when you started seeing a drop of the number of different club promoters and the number of different types of events that were being put on. And we've kind of settled down to, a handful that if you pull the veil back, it's really all one or two people.
Right.
And so, that to me, that was a damper on, the traditional nightlife that people were used to and excited about in Atlanta. We've got new things going on now. We've got new events coming through now that are bringing back a new excitement for the younger generation that they're energized about. But when you look at someone my age or in our age group,
Yes.
we're looking at it from a different perspective and saying, that's cute, but I
That's
don't know if that, I don't know if I want to be, have my cheeks out at Deviant.
at 4 o'clock in the morning. This age, I need my rest, and it's so funny just hearing. And I'm so thankful. I knew talking to you would be enlightening, but I'm so just hearing about how the city at one point rolled out the red carpet
Yes.
for us, specifically black gay people,
Yeah.
rolled out the red carpet, but then all of a sudden we weren't as important anymore, and we just, I guess, lost our sheen and our shiny newness. Is that what it was? Or
We lost the sheen, and the sheen got lost in deception and misrepresentation. Um, there was a year where we had, as in the Life Atlanta, we had regular um, corporate sponsors, not
Mhm.
lot. We had a couple of corporate sponsors, then we had some local sponsors, but we had one big corporate sponsor. I'm not going to name their name because I don't want to get them involved,
Mhm.
but large employer in Atlanta. Um, and they were very supportive of us every year. We got uh, cash and product from them.
Okay.
And each year we would do our reach out to all of our sponsors to renew their sponsorship for that year, for the next year, as we're coming up on the next year. And one year we reached out to this sponsor and says, hey, we're just reaching out because we want to renew our sponsorship. Always ask for more, see if we can get more, but let them tell us what they're going to settle on. And the response we got back was, we've already sent your sponsorship to you.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Hmm. I smell a stunt.
Yes.
A big one, apparently.
Yes. And that it was that was our largest cash sponsor. And in figuring out what went on, once they realized that they had been deceived, instead of just saying, hey, we understand it wasn't your fault, we'll continue to work with you, they just shut down on us.
Hmm.
And that was the last year that we were able to get them as a sponsor. And that trickles down sometimes, because a lot of those large corporate sponsors, the people who handle those sponsorships talk to the other people who do sponsorships in other companies.
Of
And
course.
if one company says, hey, don't deal with these folks because there's some shady shit going on, that trickles down. And so we lost that one large sponsor and one other moderately large sponsor, and then we lost a local community sponsor and all of that. And that's really when things started to struggle for ITLA. I think that year, the board got together and we decided we were not going to put on an In the Life Atlanta Black Gay Pride event that year. Simply because so many things had been damaged in terms of our finances, in terms of the reputation of the organization. But something happened, is that when we put out that notice, because we were feeling really defeated. We felt like the community didn't have our back. Our sponsors didn't have our back. We just felt completely abandoned. And we put out that notice that we weren't going to do Pride that year. And the community responded. The community demanded. The community says, no, you don't get this easy out. You have got to do something. And that energized us to take what resources we had and step up and put on what we could put on for that year. And it turned out to be one of our most exciting years. Wasn't the biggest, but because we got that boost from the community, because, you know, if you do community work, one of the things that's a challenge is getting, you know, a lot of times you don't do the work to get recognition.
Right.
But that recognition does help fuel you. And when you do the work and it seems like people are not appreciative or people don't care, or, you know, there's just no response, that sometimes can be defeating and tiring. And you're like questioning, why are you doing this? But when we got that feedback that said, we need you, you can't just step out.
Thank you so much for sharing these memories, Michael. I appreciate you so much.
I enjoyed this time.
Thank you for listening to I Come Alive, Stories of Black Gay Atlanta Nightlife. Brought to you by Q Points Productions. Special thanks to the Counter Narrative Project 2024 Media Roundtable for their support as well. Make sure you become a Q Point subscriber so that you don't miss the next episode of I Come Alive.